we are off to what you have all come for, which is the reviews. So, starting off, No, I thought you said something. Look, I'm just gonna be truthful. A bunch of these films were Netflix originals, so take it as you will. In fact, let's get all the Netflix out of the way first. So we're going to start off with Lift, starring Andre's obvious favorite actor working, Kevin Hart. It's directed by F. Gary Gray and is about a group of thieves who are basically blackmailed by the government into ripping off another villain and pulling this heist, but they have to do it off of a plane that's in the air. And, Kevin Hart kind of has a romantic history with one of the agents played by the beautiful Gugu Mbatha-Raw. And I guess because she's like kind of the same height as him. And also you have Vincent D'Onofrio in this movie, Sam Worthington, John Reno. I guess they're like, hey, we need a villain. Get the professional. Billy Magnuson, Jacob Batalon from the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland has a cameo in it. This movie, of course, I think Kevin Hart must have a contract with Netflix, so contractual obligation, because he went from playing the wimpy, kind of always scared guy in action film to now he's a full-on action hero. I'm happy. I'm short. I'm happy to see short representation, but this movie, as much as it tries, it's just so basic. It's sort of like that Ryan Reynolds, Michael Bay movie where it's like, the director's doing his usual tricks, but the script isn't up to muster. You've seen this film many times. It's just, it has this one gimmick of them robbing a plane in the middle of the air. And, of course, that third act of double crosses, triple crosses. And, it's okay, but I wouldn't recommend the movie. It's like, it's a good time waster if you have nothing else to watch, but I can't say, oh, this is good filmmaking or this is a good film. Especially, it's a shame during Black History Month, F. Gary Gray and Kevin Hart together, and they make a subpar movie. I don't want to say, oh, Antoine Fuqua would have directed the hell out of it. I don't think he would have made it. So, Andre, how did you feel about this movie?
I wanted to like it more because it was F. Gary Gray. And being that he did the Italian Job remake, which was pretty entertaining, I thought maybe, the trailers were not that great, but maybe it will be better than what I expect. And it wasn't. It was more like that Operation Fortune movie with Jason Statham. And the same look, the same feel. And like you said, nothing original is really added. And I think my biggest problem is just trying to get Kevin Hart to play a straight action hero leader type, especially at the end when they have to him and Gugu Mbatha-Raw have to fight off the bad guys on the plane. That's where I was like, okay, you really lost me here because I do not believe this one bit. And I will say, I give credit. They took a short guy like him and made him a leading man, but I didn't believe it. This is not Eddie Murphy or even Martin Lawrence. When you put him in a Michael Bay movie, has more credibility as an action star than Kevin Hart does. And that says a lot. So yeah, this one, thumbs down. I don't recommend it.
Okay. Well, no ifs, ands, or buts there. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at Bradley Cooper's directed, starring, co-wrote Maestro, about the life of Leonard Bernstein, with him, Carey Mulligan, Matt Boomer, Michael Urie, Sam Nivola, Sarah Silverman, Maya Hawke, Miriam Shore, and Josh Hamilton. When it comes to this film, obviously Oscar bait, and I'm not going to say the movie's bad because I will give Bradley Cooper credit. He directs the hell out of this film. But the problem is, that's exactly the problem. He directs the hell out of this film, and then he puts himself starring. Because it's an interesting mix. he's the only director who would put Bradley Cooper playing Leonard Bernstein. But I also feel like he's not getting the credit he's due because he's starring in the film instead of staying strictly behind the scenes. Like if he had just directed and co-wrote the script, I think the film would be thought of better and he'd get more credit. But with him starring in it, I feel like people are already pouring on, oh, this vanity project, which also is interesting because the film doesn't go the traditional biofilm route. It does focus on Leonard Bernstein as the center of the action, but it's not like a greatest hits ensemble and we see how he comes up with this or how he does that. It mostly focuses on Carey Mulligan's character as his wife and how she reacts being next to this legend who's like bisexual, cheats on her constantly, whose trust she can't really, a man she can't really trust because he's broken her heart so many times, even though throughout the film, it begins with their romance and seeing, you know, when they're in love and idealistic, and then when they start having kids and how it kind of, it doesn't work with their family lifestyle. And then finally how they break apart and, you know, basically she's trying to not put him as the villain in the kids' eyes, but then the kids see who he really is separately. And I think that's an interesting take on, you know, the biofilm and the character. So I like it for that. And it's shot beautifully by Matthew Lubbock Quay because I like how it goes from, even when it goes from black and white to color, it still has that 1960s, 70s grainy color to it. So it really looks like it's being filmed in the period that it's set in. So there's a lot of pluses for the film. I just don't think, unfortunately, I just don't think it's good enough for Oscar bait. And I think it's a satisfying film. It's a good film, but it's not a great film. And Andre, how did you feel watching Maestro? And
pretty much the same. I think that the direction by Bradley Cooper is solid. Carey Mulligan, if she gets an Oscar, well, yeah, I think her part is really the Oscar-worthy role more so than him, to be honest. His makeup was fine for the most part, and there's some parts where it was a little wonky. Production design's good, the acting's good, but it wasn't that interesting to me. I think there were just a lot of times I got kind of bored and tired, and the constant him going behind his wife's back and cheating on her, they seemed to like want to hammer that over the head, and that gets kind of boring. It's like, what else is going on with this guy that makes him interesting? And I don't think we got enough of that. So I think on a technical level, I recommend it. But in terms of like, was I entertained? Is it a movie I would go back to? No.
well, I wonder with him, why is it that he keeps picking music themed projects each time he makes a film? And films where the actress or, you know, his co-star, his female co-star, is always has the better role and the more show-stopping role than he does. Because at this point, for me, Carey Mulligan as an actress is like Kate Blanchett Jr. She can do no wrong. She can play those weird type of roles, but she can also play those upper crust, you know, type of roles, and you know, not really blink an eye. And I'm like, so I think she needs to get more work and better work. But I am going to give this movie a mild recommendation. You know, or no, I'm going to give it a recommendation. Not a high recommendation, but I do recommend watching it. And next, we take a look at Society of the Snow, which is about a soccer team and their family that crashed in the Andes, and it took I don't remember, like basically like 3 months for them to finally be rescued, and only because a few of them trekked away from, you know, their crash site to try and find civilization to get help. But this was after they unfortunately started eating, you know, the non-survivors. A lot of you might remember this story from the movie Alive. And what I find interesting about this movie, because I was one of those people who saw Alive, not in theaters, but Alive, the big thing everybody remembers other than the eating of the people was the crash scene, you know, which was like this special effects extravaganza at the time. watching this film, they show the crash in spectacular fashion again. But what they also do with this film is like in the first and Alive, they made it seem like they waited months and months to finally start like, hey, let's go travel, try to climb these mountains and find civilization. But here it shows they tried like kind of little mini attempts to do that, but somehow somebody got hurt or the weather. They always had to find a way back to come back. And then I guess the final time is when they finally managed to go far and away. But I mean, compared to Alive, this is a lot more informative, a lot more dramatic, a lot more heartbreaking. But I will say, I really enjoyed this movie more than I expected to, because I know you saw it first and kept telling me, yeah, you should definitely check this out. But I was like, yeah, I saw Alive. So, but I'm glad when I finally did see it, because this is like really a good film. And director J.A. Boyona, he's making a career out of tragedy, because he also directed the Naomi Watts movie, The Impossible, about the survivors of the tsunami in Paradise. Andre, what did you feel about Society of the Snow, since you were the one who recommended it to me in the first place?
Well, a friend of mine recommended it to me to see, and I, like you, I only knew of the story from the movie Alive. And what was obviously different for this one was the fact that it wasn't a polished American movie. This was a foreign film with actors of, I believe they were Ecuadorian, if I'm mistaken. So you had Ecuadorian actors playing in these characters of this rugby team getting stuck. And to see it from their perspective, they really do not hold back on the tragic reality of that situation, where every moment where it looks like maybe there's a little bit of hope, the hope is always lost, having to resort to, yes, eating each other. And you knew that was coming. But the fact that they got as graphic as they did, showing as the time went on, like their skin was starting to peel to the point where it was getting to the bone. I mean, it purposely made you uncomfortable to watch, because you had to really experience what it was actually like in that moment. And that's something I think the other movie kind of failed to do, because it was so polished, because it was so Hollywood. And this one went the extra mile to make you experience that from their perspective. So it's a movie I highly recommend, but definitely do not have a full stomach watching it, because it is very nauseous, very disturbing, but it's solid filmmaking at its finest.
I agree. I definitely would recommend this film. Like I said, I enjoyed it more than I expected to. And I mean, I know if you live in New York, you can probably catch it at the Paris Theater, but it's definitely something, if you can see it on a big screen. I think it has more of an impact if you see it. The bigger the screen you see it on. But yes, and I believe it's not nominated for like Best Picture, but it is Oscar nominated, I believe. And
Foreign film?
it might. I just know it is nominated for something. I just don't know what at this time. So for our next film, we're going to take a movie that has been talked about from many critics, audiences. We're going to take a look at The Marvels, which is a sequel to Miss Marvel, with Brie Larson, Tiana Paris, Iman Vellani, Samuel L. Jackson, Zawe Ashton as the villain, Lashana Lynch, and some cameos from some previous Marvel characters. It was directed by Nia DaCosta. Look, I took a while till it was on streaming to watch this movie, so I didn't see it in theaters. I will admit, it's not the. I didn't see the externals. Keep in mind, I don't think it was horrible, but you also have to keep in mind the only, to me, entertaining aspect of this movie was Iman Vellani. She was the only thing that kept my interest up watching this film because I think she's a natural. She's funny. She's real as her character, being a fan and a superhero. And now, having said that, this film suffers from what a lot of Marvel films that I have seen suffers from, where it feels like I am on a soundstage and everything looks like this was filmed on a stage. This was a problem, even though it's not a Marvel movie, that you felt when you were watching like Rebel Moon, directed by Zack Snyder. So it just feels automatically claustrophobic, even though this is supposed to be taking place in this big, wide universe. It's nice to see Samuel L. Jackson, but I'll be honest, I don't remember half the movie after I watched it. I don't even remember what the villain's plan was. I like Zoe.
Rip off of Spaceballs.
Okay. I know Zoe Ashton. I like her because she's the first Marvel villain I saw who has a grill. So I was like, yo, she's blinged out though, even if this movie isn't that great. But I didn't like the film as a whole, only because, like I said, it's so forgettable, you know? And, I mean, look, I will admit, I'm not a fan of Nia DaCosta's Candyman film. And this could be a second strike, but I don't totally blame her for this film because it's such a huge undertaking, especially for someone who's only directed one film before. And it seems like all her films are sequels or reboots at this point. So I will hold my opinion of her skill until I see her actually direct an original film, you know, that isn't tied to any IP. But I like just hearing the alternate ending where they were going to have Carol Danvers versus the villain, and they were going to kill each other, basically. Coming together shows they don't care about continuation. They don't really care about the characters. And I'm like, it feels like a film that even before it was made, they decided in their mind, this is disposable. So that is how watching the film it felt. It felt like when you watch a film where nobody cares. Nobody really cares where this is going. Everybody's here more for a paycheck. There's no passion in any of this. It's just forgettable, but I don't think it's as bad as everybody made it seem when it first came out. I think there is merit to build off of, but I think ultimately it's a failure. So I would not recommend this movie. How did you feel about the Marvels?
So I'll put it to you like this, and I've said a lot about Brie Larson in terms of playing Captain Marvel. I think generally she's a fantastic actress. I loved her in Room. She deserved the Oscar for that performance. So I'm not one of those Brie Larson haters. Okay. But I have said that her portrayal as Captain Marvel always came off a little too snarky, a little too not warm as a character. It's as if, you know, she comes off very selfish, especially in Avengers Endgame. And I think that's part of the reason why she's not that likable in the role. I think with this movie, at least there was some effort to soften the character, especially through her relationship with Miss Marvel, you know, rather than trying to like push her off and the whole like you never meet your heroes kind of deal going on. She actually does warm up pretty quickly and accepts her as like a fangirl and as a sidekick for the most part. And that's probably as high of a positive compliment I can make. And yes, you know, one thing I will say, because you were saying like everybody looks like they're doing it for paycheck, but I will say that Iman Vellani does put in effort. You could tell she's a fan. You could tell she loves this character, and every scene that she's in, she does bring a positive light to playing Miss Marvel and shows that even in the times where you're kind of annoyed by the character, that she's giving 100%. So I will give you that. That's as positive as I'm going to say about this movie. Here's the problem. For one, Nia DaCosta was definitely in over her head doing this picture. You could tell this was not her movie. This was something that was studio controlled, and she even said that. This is more of a Kevin Feige production than something that she feels personally attached to. And She was very subtle about it during the press tour, and now she finds herself doing more of an original movie with Tessa Thompson right now that will probably have more of her stamp, more of what she wants to say as a filmmaker. So I'm not going to blame her for the movie's problems. The
Mm-hmm.
problem here is, for one, they depend on the idea that the audience has already watched Miss Marvel, they've watched WandaVision, and that they know the backstories of Miss Marvel and Monica Rambeau, and that it's going to be this exciting event when they're all together with Captain Marvel. And that doesn't work because Monica Rambeau is not a strong character. She had the relationship as a child to Captain Marvel, but as an adult, that character doesn't catch on with the audience in a way where people look at WandaVision and say, "Oh, I want to see her in the spinoff." Fiona Paris is a fine actress, but the character is totally underwritten and just sort of forced in there just so that they could say that they have a black female superhero in this movie. That's one issue. And then the other issue is they expect every director to be James Gunn, that they could do the comedy, they could do the cosmic, colorful thing. And I agree that the set design and everything is very studio controlled to the point where it just, a lot of it looks cheap and phony. But when they try so hard to do the comedy, whether it's the planet where everybody sings as they speak, or the whole sequence with the Flurkins and having to keep them contained on the planet, on the ship, so they're not killing everybody, it's like this is where you're starting to have that problem with the MCU where there's nobody behind the wheel really creating quality control. This is where Kevin Feige is stretched thin, and they try to double down on things, whether it's with the diversity, whether it's with the comedy, or whatever they thought worked in one movie, they think they can make it work in something else. And when it doesn't work, that's when you get superhero fatigue. That's when people get tired of the MCU and all the stuff that we're being bombarded with. And this was just a pure example of what happens when everything goes off the rails, when a character turns out to be not as popular as you think, when you hire the wrong director, and when you don't have a producer behind the wheel overseeing and making sure the quality is up to standard. Because you can even tell watching that movie, it was a much longer film that got chopped down to 90 minutes. And it was so bad that the marketing try and make you feel like this was an event picture. What it was, oh, I called a friend, and you see the Bifrost and it's Valkyrie. Oh, we're going to do this final trailer where we show clips from the Avengers. Oh, remember the Avengers, how great they were? This is Captain Marvel and how important she is. And the villain's going to be just like Thanos. And it's nothing like that. This is not an event picture at all. This is basically Captain Marvel 2, but Captain Marvel and friends, and it doesn't work. I don't recommend it. And I think this is the turning point for MCU to get their shit together.
Well, I would say from this film, two things. I would have rather you give, even though I know you're not a big fan and I don't love it, but I'd rather you give the Marvel television show a second season, so we have more Imani Vellani in the role, or make her somehow part of Guardians of the Galaxy. Because I would like to see her mixed with other characters, but in a better film. And that gives her more of a chance to shine. Because, yes, like I said, everybody here feels like they are in for a paycheck. She's the only one who seems interested and actually, like, excited to be in this movie. And it's a shame because...
I'll add with Marvelani, sorry to interrupt, but I feel that if you give her another season of her show, you got to do something huge to build up the viewership. Because one of the problems with Miss Marvel was that it got great reviews from critics, but the viewership was the lowest up until, the recent shows like Echo, the lowest rated show on Disney Plus. And they tried to put on ABC to get the attention, and that didn't work. So if you can't do a second season that's going to build interest, she's got to be in a team-up movie as a supporting character, whether it's they're talking about Young Avengers, which I think is better off as a Disney Plus show, or just have her as a member of the adult Avengers and go from there and have somebody bigger, whether it's Spider-Man or Doctor Strange as the leader, because that's the only way that character can continue to exist in MCU. She does not draw on her own unless you do something major like an X-Men tie-in.
Well, I guess it's sort of like when you watch a sitcom, it's all the quirky characters who are the most interesting, but you need that straight man in the lead because you have to base the show off of them. But if you gave a crazy character their own show, you're making them the straight man. So you have to make the supporting characters even crazier. So, unfortunately, she's a great actress, a great character, but she just has nowhere to go, unfortunately, at this point.
Right.
So next we are going to talk about Eli Roth returning to horror with the movie Thanksgiving, based on his trailer that was part of the Grindhouse double feature. Um, he co-wrote this with Jeff Rendell, and this movie has his regular Rick Hoffman as part of the cast, but also Patrick Dempsey, Guy Olson, Gina Gershon, and it has strangely, for no reason, I guess because it's a teen slasher film, we have this whole list of random teenagers in this film, including influencer Addison Rae of TikTok fame. Andre, I will let you start off, and then I will give my thoughts on the film. Describe what Thanksgiving is about, and then tell us what you thought about it.
All I remember was it's just about a guy dressed up like a pilgrim hacking up people in a small town. And they're hacking up teenagers. And before that, there's like a whole Black Friday sequence with a bunch of people die. And that's the only favorite part that I have is the Black Friday sequence at the beginning when everybody's beating the shit out of each other and getting killed. That's the only part where I felt like this was like what that Grindhouse trailer was many years ago. The rest of this movie sucked. This was nothing like the trailer. And if anything, they pulled back on some of the more gorier stuff, like the trampoline scene and the dinner scene from the Grindhouse trailer. They have all that depicted, but they kind of dial back on the thriller and the horror elements of it. This was a complete waste of time. I do not recommend this one.
See, I am on the total other half of the spectrum when it comes to this film. I like the beginning of the Black Friday sale. I'll admit it does differ from the trailer because it has more of a full story. Because the story was about some kid who loved a turkey, and then his father killed it for Thanksgiving dinner. So then the boy killed his family, and then after he gets out of the insane asylum, comes back and takes revenge on the town. This film, totally different plot line. Okay, when it comes to this movie, the teenagers, I don't want to say they deserved it, but they all had their types of characters. This film throws out 50,000 red herrings as to who the killer could be. And then when you finally see who the killer is, it's still it's not that shocking. What I thought that they should have kept doing was, since you have Addison Rae, who's a popular TikTok influencer, I felt like the cast of kids should have all been influencers, so that for people who don't like them would have came more to the movie and cheered it on. The infamous trampoline scene, if they did that, it would have had to be NC-17. I thought what they did with the trampoline was a little bit more inventive. My only problem was the murder that happens before the trampoline with the other dude from the opposing team breaking his neck. I'm like, so apparently not only is this guy a slasher, but he's super powered. So that was my only thing where I was like, really? But, I like the goriness, like the black guy's girlfriend when she's killed in the movie, and the guts are all spewing at her non-English speaking father. I mean, the mystery wasn't that great. The Black Friday sale was good, but it's hard to take half of the film seriously when everybody has a New England accent and is really trying hard to sell it. And I don't know why, but when they killed the waitress in the beginning, it reminded me of James Gunn produced movie where, remember the woman, the waitress, somehow her eye gets glass in it.
Oh, yeah.
Brightburn. It reminded me of that scene. It plays into Eli Roth's usual bag of tricks. The only thing that he didn't have in this movie was nudity, which he usually has in his films. But I felt like, even though it's set modern day, this was a great throwback to a 80s type slasher. Could have been a 90s type slasher. I feel like if it had been made in the 90s, we'd have some Freddie Prinzes and some Jennifer Love Hewitts in here more. But I actually enjoyed the film for what it was. Maybe because I saw it on streaming rather than going to see it in theater, but I had fun with it. I mean, it's not the greatest, but at least I stayed entertained, you know. I didn't know who any of the young actors were. The ending was a little silly with the dream. And I'm just like, it was her boyfriend who was a baseball player, or ex-boyfriend, was he only like Hispanic because Jay Hernandez, who was in the original trailer, was Hispanic? Because it's like, okay, he's short, he's looks like he's already losing his hair. Why is he like this college baseball star? You know, and everybody else. I mean, it was like, what was that? It was I Know What You Did Last Summer. The athletic dickhead, the pretty one, this one. So it was like pretty big. The oven, look, the turkey on the table. I thought that was inventive, only because we actually see her being baked first and foremost. Though I'm like, so now is the killer a cannibal too? Though it's So I thought that was inventive, as you know, she was the one who like destroyed the tapes. Um, but it was like Milo Manheim, who was Cameron Manheim's son. He was like one of the bigger names in the cast, and they barely use him throughout this film, other than to be the dick new boyfriend and maybe a suspect for the killer. But here, this is a thumbs up, thumbs down in classic Siskel and Ebert fashion, because I liked it. You obviously hated the film. But I say give it a chance. I recommend it. And we come to our final review, which is a movie I saw opening week, and it took Andre a little bit longer to see. We're talking about American Fiction, based on the novel Erasure by Percival Everett. It's written and directed by Cord Jefferson, and it's about a black African American writer who writes more, I would say, intellectual books that isn't about African American life or culture, who is tired of being put in just as an African American writer and seeing books that glorify the ghetto getting bestsellers and white people clamoring to it, and he's having his own family problems and not selling, especially after being asked to leave from his teaching position and his book deal kind of being canceled. So drunkenly he writes this hood book as a joke, but it sends all these publishers wanting to buy the book, and so he decides to keep up the ruse as the writer of the book under an alias, as an ex-con or just an escaped convict who has put this book out. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and he can't step away. At the same time, he's finding romance, but also dealing with his dysfunctional family, with his mother having dementia, his sister dying unexpectedly, and his brother coming out of the closet. So all these, plus the woman who takes care of his mother is now getting into a romance her own and is getting married, and now he has to find somebody to take care of her. That's pretty much the movie in a nutshell. There's much more that happens. It's a satire, but also a drama. And Andre, I'm gonna let you go first. What did you think of American Fiction? And
I think it lived up to all the hype that everybody's been talking about. Every performance in here is so solid. The story completely works. I like the fact that it wasn't just fully about him trying to hide the fact that he's not really from prison. He's not really from the streets. He just wrote this book just for the hell of it, and then didn't realize it was going to blow up into this big thing. But that you have that whole plot with the family, because everybody, Leslie Uggams was good. I was shocked with Tracy Ellis Ross when her character dies. That came out of left field to me. And of course, Sterling K. Brown, he should get an Oscar for his performance, because he was really good as the brother and what they did there. And I think the movie, weirdly enough, even by the time it ended, and you had the whole thing with the multiple different endings that are in his head, and you're kind of still guessing what the real ending is. Um, I feel like it kind of speaks to the way Hollywood is right now when it comes to over glorifying diversity, but not in the right way. And when you had that whole sequence when he's having a conversation with Issa Rae's character near the end, like I guess he's trying to defend a book, and she's kind of like, well, it's sort of inauthentic. That sort of speaks to what's going on right now with how we depict black culture on film, and thinking that it's being glorified when really you're just kind of setting us back in some ways, going one step forward, one step back. And this movie sort of encapsulates that. And I think Jeffrey Wright's the perfect actor for this particular role, to be somebody that wants to just be accepted as a writer, not as a black writer, and ends up having to sell himself out just to do that. And the conflicts he faces, that's easily relatable. And he just, for the body of work he's presented over the years, I think this is one of the best roles he's ever played in his life. And that's why I really recommend it.
Well, okay. Well, I liked that, as you were saying, I like the argument. They presented both sides of the story when he has the conversation with Issa Rae, because she's like, why does it matter to you so much? It's just, like, this is just a story. This is just a book. It doesn't personally bother me. I don't think it sets us back or anything. But then I find it interesting then when the white lady comes in, it's like, so what we're talking about, they're both quiet and silent because she wouldn't understand. I love the movie. The only thing I guess I could be critical of is I don't think it was. You could tell it was a first time director. I think the script is great, but I thought it could have been directed a little bit better. Like, the script is better than the direction. And I read the book before I saw the movie, so the book is much darker. So this is kind of more lighthearted than the actual book. Because I would tell people what it was, but go read the book yourself. You'll see the difference. I like seeing Erica Alexander on the big screen.
Yeah,
let's
see her.
I like you said, I like the multiple endings where we don't really get a happy ending, so to speak. We get a good enough ending. Like you said, I think Sterling K. Brown steals the movie, as his supporting character, closeted brother, selfish brother, who's like kind of having his own sort of crisis, and just the hairdo alone, as I've always said about Sterling K. Brown, I just like that he's a chameleon, because every different role, it's a different look, and it doesn't look like he doesn't look like the guy from This Is Us. He doesn't look like the guy from that bad Predator movie. He doesn't look like the master thief from that movie with Jodie Foster and Jeff Goldblum. He doesn't even look like the same dude as that Thurgood Marshall movie with Chadwick Boseman when he's the accused. So I always appreciate him for just putting that different look. And like you said, I think this is one of the better roles for Jeffrey Wright, but he's always gotten all these good roles, from being Basquiat in that movie, and like one of his first major roles, to you have him on Westworld. You even had him in that comedy with Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams, Game Night, in a smaller role, but he was memorable. So he's an actor who's come a long way from being the villain, the Dominican villain in Shaft. So I applaud him. I definitely highly recommend the movie. Like I said, my one little criticism is that I thought the direction could have been sharper, but definitely a great adaptation, a great film. Leslie Uggams is great. Tracy Ellis Ross, gone away too soon in this movie.
I even like Keith David with the whole, like, as he's writing a book and you see everything play out, like, oh no, you got to say this differently. I thought that was cool. They didn't do enough of that.
Exactly. I thought he was going to be in more of the movie, not just like one scene where he does. You got to give credit to John Ortiz as his book agent.
He was good.
Adam Adam Brody, who always to me never disappoints, as a Hollywood executive who's trying to make this into a movie. The only other criticism I will say is I wish it would have been like a little more humorous when he's trying to convince him that he's this criminal. It is just like, oh, this is so bad that he's not that convincing as a criminal. And, like the escape. And even when he goes on like that Oprah type show behind like the screen, it was like, oh, come on, y'all. But I really like the film. It's probably next to Society of the Snow. Probably the highest recommendation I will give this show. That definitely go out and see this as soon as possible. It's a wonderful film. I mean, I'll admit I was shocked it got so many Oscar nominations, but that's because this is the type of film that Oscar usually overlooks. So I was happy that it got so many nominations, and I say more power to it. And definitely, if you can see it, go see it when you can. You will not be disappointed. Especially if you're African American. Because this is a film that obviously Caucasians will love. So, and that does it for all this episode and the reviews. But as you know, this ends this week's business. But as you know, we always have unfinished business. And I have to ask, have you seen The Covenant by Guy Ritchie? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what film would you recommend for the people?
Have you seen The Greatest Night in Pop on Netflix? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
And that is the end, and we bid you all adieu.
If you like this review, please be sure to like and hit subscribe to be alerted to new episodes in the future.